Our keynote speaker this afternoon is Justin Tomlinson MP, Minister for Family Support, Housing and Child Maintenance at DWP. So would you please welcome Justin Tomlinson to speak to us?
Thank you. Part of what I'm going to be doing today is talking about universal credit, because it is incredibly important, because already for many of your tenants it is part of their everyday life. And every week going forward, there will be more and more people engaging with the universal credit process. It is the single biggest transformation in benefits in a generation. There are already over 500 different job centres that have gone live with universal credit, with the last few going live in the coming weeks. So by the end of this year, every single job centre for every single new claimant will be providing universal credit. There are over 1 million claimants already on universal credit, and from January onwards, it will be an additional 150,000 per month. And this is not just people who are out of work. In Wales alone, 35% of the existing claimants are in work, as universal credit doesn't just provide support for finding work, but it navigates the childcare, the housing and the training support that the government provides. So this is absolutely key for many of your tenants. Now, the reason that we did this is that we recognised we had to change legacy benefits. If you needed to claim benefits, there were 3 different agencies: HMRC, local authorities, DWP. There were 6 forms of benefits, and frankly, you had to be a nuclear physicist to know what you were entitled to. And our research and our evidence, unsurprisingly, identified that 700,000 people were missing out on average £285 per month in benefit support, worth about £2.4 billion. And this was some of the most vulnerable claimants, where £5 a month could make a difference, let alone £285. And crucially, if your circumstances changed, often unplanned, so your work status, your family relationship or your health, because it was so confusing, there were delays until you were able to identify who could help support you, allowing your problems to grow and compound and causing all too many people to crash out of the system. And you as landlords were often the people left to pick up the pieces when those issues were related to housing. And rightly, we recognised this could not continue. It also provided barriers for people to go into work. Now, this is incredibly important because everybody recognises the best route out of poverty is through work. A workless household is 4 times more likely to be in poverty than a household that is in work. Yet, for some claimants, there was an effective tax rate of 90%. There was the well-known 16, 24 and 30-hour cliff edge barriers, so that if you worked one more than that, you could potentially lose all of your benefits. And this was a nightmare for claimants, particularly seeking to go from part-time work to full-time work, or for employers as they were trying to move them on to full-time work in stages. And rightly, that was something that had to change. So a rare occurrence in politics, and something I think under the current Brexit circumstances we would welcome, there was cross-party support for the principles of universal credit. And the reason was it would be a simplified benefit. It was one single payment. And for the first time ever, you would have a named work coach. So you as a claimant would have one point of contact who would help you navigate all parts of the support that was available and accessing the correct amount of financial benefit that you could get. And at that point of change of circumstances with health, work or family relationships, that named work coach was on hand to help you quickly navigate and deal with your changed circumstances. Now, analysis has already shown that with that personalised support, the claimant can spend 50% more time looking for work, and we estimate an additional 200,000 people will be able to go into work, and that's above and beyond our current record employment, which is not just London and South East based, but in every single region of the UK, we have record employment. Under universal credit, we have increased childcare provision, which was one of the biggest barriers identified that was preventing people going into work. Under legacy benefits, you could claim back 70% of your costs. Under universal credit, it is 85%. And that is worth about £646 for one child per month and £1,108 for two children per month. We provide access to universal support, particularly around budgeting, and we provide support for housing and training. We've removed those cliff edges, and universal credit works in real time, so that as circumstances change, the universal credit support changes with it, providing a minimum income floor and supporting those people quickly and not having to start and stop your benefits each and every time your work conditions change. And we also provide access to advance payments, alternate payments, direct payments and budget support. And as I said, it was a rare thing that we had cross-party support for this major transformation. But this is where I wish to pay tribute to yourselves and particularly to the RLA, because they are one of the most proactive, constructive trade bodies, listening to your feedback, your suggestions and your concerns and your criticisms. And we have made it very clear as a government that universal credit, as important and as powerful and as transformational as it can be, it still is in test and learn. And if people present us with good feedback, we have acted and we have made changes. And I know from personal meetings with the RLA, plus their key work in the stakeholder engagements, the events, the webinars, the communications that are shared out, that they are a very, very strong constructive voice for each and every one of you. And as an individual minister, I'm also meeting individual organisations, and in the last few months alone I've met with the Trussell Trust, Crisis, Salvation Army, Gingerbread, Barnardo's, CPAG, Children's Society, Women's Aid, Refuge, Citizens Advice, Scope and Joseph Rowntree. All critical friends, challenging, pushing, making sure, rightly so, that we get the rollout of universal credit right. And I would encourage you to keep engaging either through the RLA or directly with us. And to prove that we've listened, we have already announced significant improvements. We've removed the 7-day waiting time for which you can then be eligible to claim benefits. We now make advance payments an automatic part of the initial conversation. Advance payments always existed. This is where people can access their benefits in advance. But people had to know about it. And so too few people were taking advantage of that, potentially leaving them with a gap in income. Now that is part of that initial conversation. So every single claimant is aware that is an option available for them. For the repayment of that, initially it was 6 months. We moved that to 12 months, and we're now moving that to 16 months. And we will look at each individual claimant's individual circumstances to make sure any repayment is sustainable and fair based on their own individual circumstances. For every claimant moving from legacy housing benefit, they will be given 2 weeks worth of housing benefit money worth up to £237, no strings attached, additional money. We will also, in 2020, give an additional 2 weeks ESA, JSA or income support money worth up to £200, and that was announced in the recent budget. Again, no strings attached, no requirement to repay, that is additional money. That we are also doing a lot more work, and this was a really big request from landlords, to do with the alternate payments. So that if somebody on legacy benefits was having the rent paid direct, we will have that conversation with the claimant to see whether that is still appropriate going forward, rather than automatically presuming all claimants should manage their own money. We will look at their individual circumstances. And if a tenant falls into arrears, you as a landlord have the ability to contact the job centre and ask for direct payments, and we would then set that up if a tenant has fallen into arrears. Whilst universal credit is paid in monthly cycles, we recognise that's not right for all. So again, based on individual circumstances, we can now provide more frequent payments, whether that's 1 week, 2 weeks, and again providing additional budgeting support. And to make sure that budgeting support is the very best that it can be, we have announced that the Citizens Advice will be paid to provide their independent advice and support within every single job centre in the country starting from April next year. And that is in addition to what many local authorities will continue to do. And that, as the Citizen Advice are a trusted independent brand, we can have every confidence that those people navigating changes to their circumstances will get that extra level of personalised support. And we've also, again, based on feedback from landlords, we will make it possible, with the consent of the claimant, explicit consent, that the landlord can talk directly to the claimant's case manager. And that is particularly important as people, if they find themselves in changing circumstances and in difficulty, so that there's a much better level of communication between all parties as we seek to stabilise the situation. And for broader advice on universal credit, there is a single point of contact in every job centre, the partnership manager, who again can provide advice on how universal credit works and what are the options available going forward. We've increased the amount of work allowance each claimant can earn before they have to repay part of the taper rate. That's worth about £630 extra a year. We've, as of the 1st of October, brought in a duty to refer. So if any claimant is within 56 days of potentially being made homeless, we now, all frontline staff, have a duty to work with all partnership organisations to put a personalised plan in place to avoid that, to help us rightly reduce homelessness. And for those who've decided that they want to become self-employed, and good for them, I ran my own business for 10 years. It's a worthy way to go. We have made an exemption for the first 12 months where their business doesn't have to hit the minimum income floor to be classed as a valid business, just giving that bit longer for fledgling businesses to stabilise, whilst universal credit provides a minimum income level. And finally, for some of the most vulnerable claimants, those with disabilities, we have put additional protections in place. So there will be 1.1 million more disabled people who will be, on average, an additional £110 a month better off. All these improvements have been part of the £4.5 billion worth of additional monies put in place in the budget. And at the moment, we spend around about £90 billion a year on working age benefits, the highest amount in the OECD, and that will increase by £22 billion by the end of this Parliament, because we recognise that we are there to support those either out of work or seeking to get into work to the benefit of society. So starting next year, for the first time, there will be what's called managed migration. So at the moment, you access universal credit either if you are a new claimant where the system is live in the job centres, or your circumstances have significantly changed. But for the first time, those on legacy benefits will start to be moved over to the new benefit. Next year, we will only be doing 10,000 people. It will be very slowly, carefully managed as we look very carefully at the experiences to feed into our test and learn approach. And remember, that 10,000 compares to the actual natural growth of 150,000 per month. So it is a tiny part of the work for next year. But we will be listening very carefully, and we will be seeking to make adaptations where we think that will make improvements, for which, again, the RLA, on behalf of you, will be very much part of those conversations. Now, I have an ask of all of you as landlords. And that is, first of all, make sure all of your tenants who are moving on to universal credit do have the paperwork that shows what their rent liability is. It seems obvious to say that, but we cannot verify a claimant's application until all of their paperwork is in place, and that will remove any delay to getting access to advance payments and to their monthly payments and support. It is really important they have that paperwork. And we need to make sure that your claimants know to go and do that straight away. So that clock is ticking to allow the unlocking of the formal support. And also encourage your tenants who have moved into paying the money directly to have direct debits, so that then it is automatically part of their budgeting and experience. And if you have issues with your tenants, then speak to the job centre, speak to the work coaches or the partnership manager, so we can explore the alternative payments, the advance payments and the other options that are available there to make sure issues do not grow, do not get compounded, do not escalate, which ultimately under legacy benefits led to some of the most vulnerable people crashing out of the system. Together we can make sure this is a positive experience for claimants. So in conclusion, Universal credit will transform people's lives. Work coaches, and I spend a lot of time visiting job centres, are genuinely very enthusiastic about this because for the first time they have been empowered to offer that personalised individual support, no longer treating people as a number, no longer that one size fits all, making sure regardless of their individual circumstances or challenges or opportunities, they have got the best chance to get into work, whether that's a few hours, whether that's full-time, whether it's the first time for many years, or whether it's returning to work quickly after a change of circumstances. That every single claimant is best placed to improve their life chances, and that is something that has really infused our team of work coaches across all of our job centre networks. And as landlords, you can be assured that each and every one of your tenants is getting access to full wraparound support. So when those challenges come forward, we are best placed to help them manage those difficult times and restabilise the situation, which is of benefit obviously to the claimant, but to you too as landlords. We very much value your feedback and your suggestions that you're making, and please keep working with the RLA because we are determined to get this right, because this is the single most important transformation in welfare in a generation and we have to get it right. Thank you, everyone.